Welcome to Global Trends. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In July 2025, the gas-logged Glasgow slipped quietly out of Kitimat, British Columbia, its hull heavy with liquefied natural gas destined for a new market. This was no ordinary voyage. For decades, Canadian gas had flowed almost exclusively south, fueling American cities and industries. But this time, the Glasgow was charting a bold new course, across the vast Pacific, toward the bustling ports of Asia. Its destination, South Korea, not the US, signaled a seismic $48 billion shift in Canada's energy strategy. This was the first major shipment in a plan years in the making, a plan to diversify Canada's energy customers and reduce its vulnerability to the unpredictable swings of the American market. This shipment was more than just LNG, it was a declaration of independence. Canada was signaling to the world that it would no longer be tethered to a single customer, that it was ready to compete on the global stage and forge new alliances. For generations, Canada's energy fortunes rose and fell with American demand. The two countries were deeply intertwined, their economies linked by pipelines and power lines. But in recent years, the relationship had grown strained. Trade disputes, shifting regulations, and the rise of U.S. shale gas made the future uncertain. Faced with declining U.S. demand and a desire for greater control over its own destiny, Canada made a strategic decision to redirect its vast natural gas reserves toward the fast-growing economies of Asia, where energy hunger shows no sign of slowing. Prime Minister Mark Carney's message was clear and confident: Canada has what the world needs, and it's ready to choose its own partners. Standing before a backdrop of gleaming LNG terminals, he announced a new era of Canadian energy independence and ambition. The Kitimat shipment was just the beginning. It marked the first step in transforming Canada from a regional supplier into a true global energy superpower, capable of shaping markets far beyond North America. With billions invested in state-of-the-art LNG infrastructure, Canada is betting big on a future where its resources fuel the economic engines of Asia. The stakes are high, but so is the potential. Canada is no longer just America's gas station. It's aiming to become a cornerstone of global energy security, powering the cities and industries of a rapidly changing world. News of Canada's bold move to ship energy to Asia sent shockwaves through Washington, catching U.S. officials and the public off guard. For decades, the United States had relied on Canada as a stable, friendly supplier of oil and gas, and this sudden shift was seen as a direct challenge to that long-standing relationship. The White House erupted in outrage, with advisors scrambling to assess the potential impact on American energy security and economic interests. The news dominated headlines, fueling heated debates in political circles and on cable news. President Trump, feeling blindsided and betrayed by a close ally, wasted no time in responding. He slapped steep tariffs on a range of Canadian goods, from steel to agricultural products, and threatened even harsher penalties if Canada didn't reverse course. The administration framed these measures as necessary to protect American jobs and industries. To the U.S., Canadian energy had always been an integral part of its own supply chain, almost taken for granted as a domestic resource. Canada's pivot to Asia was interpreted not just as an economic decision, but as a hostile act that undermined decades of cooperation and trust. In Ottawa, the mood was defiant. Canadian leaders saw the tariffs as heavy-handed bullying, an attempt to strong-arm Canada back into line. Instead of backing down, the pressure only strengthened Canada's resolve to diversify its markets and reduce its dependence on the U.S. Ontario Premier Doug Ford captured the national mood, warning the U.S. that Canadian energy was not a gift to be taken for granted, but a valuable commodity traded on the world stage. He insisted that Canada would not be intimidated by threats or tariffs. As the trade war escalated, the rift between the two allies deepened. Canada accelerated its efforts to build new partnerships in Asia, sending more cargo ships eastward and investing in port infrastructure to handle the growing demand. What began as a dispute over trade quickly evolved into a battle of national pride and political will, with both sides digging in and refusing to back down. The era of easy, seamless cross-border energy was over, replaced by uncertainty and a new era of competition and tension between two former partners. Canada's pivot to Asia is driven by necessity, not just politics. For decades, Canada's energy sector relied heavily on the United States as its primary export market. But as global dynamics shift, so too must Canada's strategy. The country is now reimagining its role on the world energy stage, seeking new partners and opportunities far beyond its traditional borders. The U.S. shale revolution turned America from Canada's top customer into a competitor, shrinking the southern market. With the U.S. now producing more oil and gas than ever before, Canadian exports face stiffer competition and lower prices. This shift has forced Canada to look elsewhere for growth and stability. Asian economies, China, Japan, South Korea, offered a golden opportunity: long-term contracts, premium prices, and energy security. These nations are hungry for reliable energy sources to fuel their rapid growth, and Canada's vast natural gas reserves are an attractive solution. The demand in Asia is projected to rise for years to come, making it a strategic market for Canadian exporters. By liquefying and shipping gas to Asia, Canada can command higher prices than in the US. This process not only adds value to Canadian resources but also opens doors to new trading relationships and economic partnerships across the Pacific. The $48 billion Kitimat project is a calculated gamble on Asia's demand. It represents one of the largest private sector investments in Canadian history, aiming to transform the small town of Kitimat into a global energy hub. The project's success could set a precedent for future Canadian ventures abroad. Diversifying markets gives Canada leverage, transforming it from a price taker to a price setter. By reaching more buyers, Canada can negotiate better deals and reduce its vulnerability to market swings in any single region. Prime Minister Carney's vision is for Canada to influence global energy flows, not just supply them. He envisions a future where Canada is a key player in shaping international energy policy and standards, using its resources as a tool for diplomacy and economic growth. This strategy secures Canada's economic future and boosts its global stature. By tapping into new markets and building international partnerships, Canada is positioning itself as a leader in the global energy transition. The days of being overshadowed by the US are ending. Canada is charting its own course, determined to thrive in a rapidly changing world and to ensure its energy sector remains a pillar of national prosperity for generations to come. Canada's energy pivot threatens to hit northern US states hardest, where millions of people rely on Canadian gas and electricity every single day. States like New York and Michigan now face the risk of price spikes and even shortages, especially during the harsh winter months. Canadian hydropower and gas are absolutely critical for grid stability and industry across the northern US. Losing this supply would force utilities to seek costlier, less green alternatives, raising bills and risking blackouts for many. Manufacturing in states like Michigan and Wisconsin would suffer, making them less competitive in the global market. What started as a trade dispute could quickly become a real crisis for countless American families and businesses. Canada's LNG shipments to Asia are part of a larger ambition to become a true energy superpower. No longer content as a quiet supplier to the US, Canada aims to leverage its vast resources for global influence. Exporting LNG and oil to Asia gives Canada new diplomatic and economic power, reducing dependence on Washington. The wealth generated could fund national priorities, from infrastructure to green tech. But to be a superpower, Canada must prove it's reliable and responsible, balancing economic growth with climate commitments. Building pipelines and export terminals is just the start. The real test is reconciling prosperity with environmental stewardship. Canada's future as a global energy leader depends on getting this balance right. Canada's energy ambitions have ignited fierce internal conflict, pitting provinces and values against each other. Alberta sees pipelines to the coast as essential for survival, while British Columbia fears environmental disaster from oil spills. Indigenous communities whose lands are crossed by proposed pipelines demand respect for their rights and environmental protection. Many First Nations have mounted strong legal and grassroots opposition, citing lack of consultation and threats to their heritage. The result is a fractured landscape: economic development versus environmental and indigenous rights. Every new project becomes a battleground in courts and public protests. Canada's superpower dreams hinge on finding a path that reconciles these deep divisions. The nation's future will be defined by how it balances prosperity, rights, and the environment. Canada's pivot to Asia is redrawing the global energy map, ending the era of North American energy integration. The US can no longer take Canadian energy for granted and must now compete on a global stage. Canada, with its Pacific Gateway, gains new economic and geopolitical leverage. For Asia, Canadian LNG offers a stable, democratic alternative to volatile suppliers. This new trans-Pacific energy bridge will deepen economic and diplomatic ties between Canada and Asia. The flow of energy will be followed by capital, trade, and influence. The old, predictable lines of energy trade are gone. replaced by a more dynamic, uncertain global market. Canada's bold move is reshaping the world's energy future.